Well, good afternoon to you. It's 5:06 here on News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. You can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy meeting with Congress today, then heading over to the Pentagon, and then ultimately over to the White House. He wants more money for the war in Ukraine. Last night, Speaker Kevin McCarthy had this to say about Zelenskyy's visit.
Is Zelenskyy elected to Congress? Is he our president? I don't think I have to commit anything. I have questions for him. Where's the accountability on the money we've already spent? What is the plan for victory? I think that's what the American public wants to know.
Where's the accountability? What is the plan for victory? I think that's what the American public wants to know. Well, that's for sure. Let's bring in Congressman Mike Waltz now. He represents Florida's 6th Congressional District. He's a member of the House Armed Services Committee. Sir, nice to have you with us. Thank you.
Yeah, good to be with you. Thanks.
Take us behind the scenes today. What is it like with Vladimir Zelenskyy visiting? What kind of questions were put to him?
Well, I'll just say as a general matter, I don't think the timing is very good as we're debating as a Congress on how to get out of control spending under control. I just don't think it's great timing to be here saying, we need to spend more. One. Two, I have an op-ed out, Vince, you know that I'm someone that has said helping Ukraine defend itself and stop Putin cold is in our national interest. However, my op-ed says the era of blank checks is over. And for Joe Biden to continue to come to the Congress and say, don't bother to ask about a strategy, don't bother to ask how this wins, don't bother to bother me with explaining to the American people continually why this is in our interest. Just sign here and trust me, and if you don't support democracy and you don't care about freedom, frankly, is insulting.
Yes.
And then secondly, to go time and time again, for me to go to my constituents and say, dig deeper in your pockets when our border is out of control, when gas prices are out of control, when inflation is still ticking up, when he's not willing to go to Europeans and say, dig into your pockets deeper. And Germany just last week backed away from its 2% defense commitment. Enough is enough. If we can't get Europe to defend itself and step up to its 2% of its GDP commitment, which, by the way, only 9 of 31 countries have done, then when will they ever? So I just don't see how, without those, at a minimum, those conditions, that I can get to any more aid.
Just before Zelenskyy arrived in the United States, he apparently fired a number of defense officials who had been engaged in some level of corruption with the very U.S. resources that we keep sending over. Do we have our arms around how much corruption we're talking about? How much money has been wasted on things that didn't involve either Ukrainian national security interests or, for that matter, ours?
Yeah, so that's a double-edged sword, right? On the one hand, apparently corruption's happening. I mean, it was one of the most corrupt countries in the world. Just ask Hunter Biden, right? But on the other hand, it's good that they're taking action, good that they're firing. I want to clarify one thing. Much of the aid, much of the dollar amount is military aid. We're not handing them, dollars or bags of cash. We're giving ammunition, tanks, parts, rifles. So it's X amount billions worth of our stuff. And if we're giving them the old stuff and then replacing it with new in our own stocks, I think that has been okay. What is so upset me with how Biden has screwed this up is, one, we should have armed them beforehand, not after. And then two, give them what they need to win, damn it.
Yep.
Instead, he has backed us into a stalemate and then again goes back to the American taxpayer time and time again. And then finally, H.W. Bush in the Gulf War, you might remember, went around the world and said, hey, this is all in our global interest to defend Kuwait against Saddam Hussein. How about you pay up Japan? How about you pay up South Korea? And you know what? They did. But instead, Joe Biden wants to use it as a political cudgel on Republicans.
Right.
And that is, that's just wrong on so many levels.
But Congressman Waltz, I do understand that a majority of the funding and equipment is going for military purposes, but
Right.
We have provided somewhere in the vicinity of $20 billion to pay the salaries of first responders, government officials. We're paying pension obligations. We're operating hospitals.
Yes.
There's a lot of money that's actually flowing into a system that, as you mentioned, is notoriously corrupt.
No, you're right. And am I confident that the State Department and USAID has good oversight of that money? No. Number one. And number two, in the defense bill that we can't seem to get off the floor right now, which is incredibly frustrating, is an IG, an inspector general for Ukraine aid, a special inspector general that will be there on the ground.
Like we had for Afghanistan.
Like we had for Afghanistan, and to this day is pointing out things that we absolutely could have done better and where corruption existed. But again, I go back to just the basics of how do we not let this turn into Afghanistan? How do we prevent this from being an endless war? How long will it take? How much will it take?
Right.
What's the strategy? And, oh, by the way, where's the burden sharing? I mean, it's just completely unfair for Germany, Italy, France, and all of those countries to keep having their social goodies and all their domestic programs while we're providing the vast majority of the military aid.
Do you know? Did Zelenskyy provide any answers about what victory looks like in Ukraine? It seems that in the military, members of the military, they always measure things based on the end state. What's the end state here? Has Zelenskyy given a clear answer on that subject, other than we want to take back literally everything, including Crimea, and that's going to happen at some unknown date?
Well, I wasn't in this meeting today to be completely clear, but in previous meetings, he has said completely expelled from territory, and I've asked him, what does that mean? The 2014 line, the Donbass, all of Crimea, and it was frankly it was vague. I think the different question to ask is, what's in line with our interest, and what are we supporting to what end? Because as long as he has a blank check from Joe Biden, he's going to go as long as and as far as he possibly can. And that's where you've had President Trump say, "Look, you tell Putin, I'm gonna completely open up the spigots unless you go to the table, and then you tell Zelenskyy, right, we're gonna tighten it back unless you go to the table, and we need to." As the main funder of this effort, decide what success looks like. And Joe Biden needs to sell that to the American people, not use it as a political weapon.
Do you read anything into the way that Zelenskyy presents himself and his administration in public? There was a kind of a famous, now infamous, American citizen who's acting as a spokesman for the Ukrainians, a transgender guy, who has been threatening to hunt down people who advance Russian propaganda around the world. I think the Zelenskyy administration may have distanced themselves from him a little bit in the past few days. But then also Zelenskyy went and spoke before the UN earlier this week and talked about how climate change is our number one issue. This is Zelenskyy at the UN.
Even though humanity is failing on its climate policy objectives, this means that extreme weather will still impact the normal global life, and some evil state will also weaponize its outcomes.
So a guy who's trying to lead a country through a war, why would he be talking about something as stupid and decadent as that?
I don't know. All I can speculate is that he was pandering to many of these European nations who he needs help from. I don't know. And on having that spokesman, woman, person, look, I mean, you got the Biden's Secretary of the Navy putting a transgender sailor as their digital ambassador, yet the Navy can't give me any data on how many transgender people would join the military but don't feel comfortable doing so, and therefore they needed to join. I mean, it just is, yes. I don't know. It's just bizarre.
But it says something about the people who control the checkbooks, though, doesn't it? I mean, obviously, Zelensky's smart enough to know that he's projecting an image that will convince these people.
I think he knows his audience. He's pandering to the progressives in this administration and to out of control progressivism in Europe.
I know obviously the end of this conflict in Ukraine is a tough answer for anybody to get their arms around. Clearly, ending the bloodshed seems like priority one. Do you have an idea on how this should end, and how should the U.S. exert its influence here? Because we obviously, with all the weaponry involved, all of the money involved, we do have a controlling stake over how this goes.
Yeah, right. I mean, look, like I said, because Biden didn't do what he should have done up front, from dragging his feet on Patriots to tanks to planes to long-range munitions.
Yes.
And I think he's backed everything into a stalemate and made it far more expensive, far more costly than he should have. So, I mean, my sense is this is in another month, the weather's going to turn and this is going to settle about where it is, one. And then two, I mean, we have to be clear that to Putin, a pause, any type of ceasefire, any type of talks is just a pause. He is very clear on reconstituting the old Soviet Union. He sees it as existential to his rule. And I don't know that he, in the long run, is going to quit. So the question is right, how do we stop the bloodshed? And then how do we prevent it from starting again?
I have two final questions for you, Congressman, and I really appreciate your time today. One of them involves the Iranians. The Biden administration just decided to send the news reports have said $6 billion. I think the number is actually closer to $20 billion ultimately of cash that they have access to now, thanks to the Biden administration. And they will quite obviously use that to pursue terrorism. They are providing drones to the Russians to help their war effort against the Ukrainians. Have you gotten any answers whatsoever on why the Biden administration seems to feel comfortable funding both sides of this war?
Well, look, I mean, I could tell you what they tell us, that they convince themselves that this money will be fenced off for humanitarian purposes. I push back and say, fine, you just freed up even if you buy that, you just freed up $6 billion that they can use for all their nefarious ends. And the message that they've sent to every terrorist group, the Russians, the North Koreans, and everyone else who hates us, is the price just went up on Americans. That's a pretty damn good payday. And so they released all of the Americans they were holding hostage in 2015 as part of the Iran deal, and they took this batch between 2015 and now, and they're going to start all over again. And so I will say, look, if you're Iranian American, if you're American anything, don't go to Iran. I do think we should have a travel ban there because they are using hostages as a payday and as leverage. And what is so upsetting to me is, why wouldn't they? There's no downside with Joe Biden. There's only upside. You only stand to gain with him. There's no consequences. What has me very concerned, Vince, is that what's really going on is that this is greasing the skids to get to some kind of non-deal Iran deal, where, like once again, Biden's going to pour cash in there for some type of temporary one-sided suspension that the Iranians aren't going to abide by at all. And if you didn't see the Saudi interview, Mohammed bin Salman's interview on Fox, he finally came out and said what all of us watching the Middle East have long known, that if Iran gets a nuke, Saudi's going to get a nuke, other countries are going to get a nuke, and a nuclear arms race in the Middle East should scare every American. That's why it matters to every American, and stopping them from getting one, and this appeasement strategy that Biden is on, this appeasement campaign from China to Iran to Russia, is dangerous for every American.
Yeah, nuclear power kind of lets you do whatever you want. I mean, that's honest. I mean, people don't like admitting that, but Putin's getting away with a lot because of his nuclear arms. So not
to mention open and ongoing threats to wipe Israel off the face of the earth.
Totally right. Last one for you. Going back to the Ukrainians now, there have been concerns throughout the war about American stockpiles of weaponry and whether or not we are hurting ourselves by sending them our weapons. That includes, for instance, howitzer shells. We've apparently reached dangerously low levels for things like that. Are you concerned about American weaponry being too drained by the war in Ukraine?
I am concerned. It's not a 5-alarm bell because the main, there's different weapons for a land war in Europe than there is obviously for an ocean and air war in the Pacific. However, what it has exposed is that our industrial base is badly, woefully atrophied. We don't have the steel, we don't have the aluminum, we don't have the foundries and factories. If we needed a Reagan-style ship buildup tomorrow, we literally don't have the people that can turn wrenches, weld, electricians, much less the shipyards and the access to the raw materials. And that's why amongst other things, what President Trump was doing to bring those supply chains home and revitalize manufacturing and blue-collar work here was so vital. Biden will tell you he's doing that, but then he puts it all in the hands of the unions. So that's where I have a much deeper concern.
All right. Congressman Mike Waltz, I always appreciate our conversations. Thank you very much, and very nice to talk to you today, sir. Let's go to the phones. We've got Anita calling in from Warrenton on line 2. Anita, you're on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hello.
Hey, thanks, Vince. Have a good. My comment is I'm a bit disheartened that Congressman Waltz and other Republicans are now starting to ask the questions that maybe they should have been asking 2 years ago with respect to this unlimited aid to Ukraine. We left behind tens of billions of dollars of armaments, munitions, an entire Bagram Air Force base in Afghanistan. And here we are still giving blank checks, in effect, to Ukraine for what exactly? And last time I checked, the biggest threat that I can think of is China and not Russia to U.S. national interest.
Yeah, for sure. And so I was heartened. You're disheartened at how long it took. I was heartened to hear him calling for accountability here at all. I'm grateful for that. And I'd like for more Republicans to do it with urgency because it seems like, we are yet again taking advantage of. And Anita, to your point, it's like how many times do we have to go through that experience before we learn this lesson more quickly?
Well, that and the fact that I would suggest that if they ever do appoint an IG for Ukraine, he may want to start visiting the south of France. I hear it's very lovely this time of the year.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Anita. I appreciate it. Yeah. It is needed. Although, as a friend emails, who picks the IG? Well, Biden. Yeah. Let's not do that. Let's have Congress assign somebody to that role. Actually, let's get rid of Biden and then put the IG in there. I don't know. We got to do something, and quick. All right. Hold tight. I've got a lot more coming up for you. The left, really out of control. The border, really out of control. And Joe Biden is separating children from their parents, and the media doesn't want to talk about it. Well, good afternoon to you. It is 5:36 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. So much of it. You can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. I'm sorry, I do have to share some amusing things with you, though. Would you mind? Can I share some amusing things? A New York Times columnist by the name of David Brooks was, I guess last night he had dinner at the airport at Newark Airport in New Jersey. And he tweeted a photo of his plate, and it's a messy-looking burger. He ripped all the vegetables off like a child, and he just has the meat and ketchup packets all over. Again, literally, this is a plain burger with ketchup on it, and he dumped all the vegetables on his plate. There's some crinkle fries right next to it, and then there's a drink in the background of the photo. He tweeted, quote, "This meal just cost me $78 at Newark Airport. This is why Americans think the economy is terrible," said David Brooks. $78. Now, look, I am aware that inflation is out of control, and perhaps at some airports, if you've got a captive audience, they could price gouge you or something. But $78 for a hamburger and some fries? This is not adding up, is it? Well, it doesn't add up actually, because some sleuths on the internet looked at the tables in the picture, looked at the burger in the photo, and they were able to figure out that this meal came from the Smokehouse restaurant in Newark Airport's Terminal A, and that the burger and fry meal costs $17. Just $17. So how did David Brooks get to $78 for this meal if the burger and fries cost $17? And the answer to that is that the booze that he was drinking ultimately added up to $78. In fact, the restaurant itself has since tweeted, quote, "Looks like someone was knocking back some serious drinks. The bar tab was almost 80%, and he's complaining about the cost of his meal. Keep drinking, buddy. We get paid off everything." That's pretty funny. So he's this guy. But, I mean, it is it isn't wrong to say that everything's much more expensive thanks to Biden. So the New York Times columnist is right on that front, but completely wrong when it comes to the price of his own meal. It was all of the drinking he did. So his alcoholism caught up with him. It is $78 to drink endlessly at Newark Airport. Oh, just amazing. That's really funny. And the reason, and a whole bunch of people, like I said, those internet sleuths, they found out what the actual cost of the meal was, and they posted it to Twitter's community notes section, which is, I think it's been a net positive for society, community notes, where people just come in and they're like, oh, here's the context they're not telling you. It's really funny. And Elon Musk has amped it up. I know they call it X now. It's just hard to say X. But he's amped it up. I've noticed in my own feed. Have you noticed this, Corey? When you're flipping through Twitter, you get an advertisement for something. Like I get a lot of advertisements for random web games. And in the ad, it's like some knight conquering a castle or defeating a dragon or whatever. But underneath the ad, Elon Musk has actually turned on a feature where people are allowed to add community notes to the ads. And I swear to you, I can't tell you the number of times I've seen a community note underneath one of these advertisements that says, this ad is fake. The game looks nothing like this ad. And that's not exactly the kind of business move that keeps that money flowing. If the advertiser's like, hey, why are you running this tag underneath my advertisement that says that the game looks nothing like the advertisement? But good for Elon. He's got enough money apparently that he can do that, and he's allowing people to add community notes to these advertisements, forcing these game creators to actually create a game worth playing if they're going to advertise it. So that's kind of amusing. Not amusing is the lack of decorum in the United States Senate. John Fetterman is a slob. John Fetterman, the senator from Pennsylvania, is a complete, unmitigated, brazen slob. And he's decided that, with Chuck Schumer's blessing, that he's going to take his slobbery to the United States Senate floor on a routine basis and insult the United States of America. Whatever happened to decorum? Whatever happened to, like, reverence for institutions, respect for literally anything? The left, look, I realize that all of us, to varying extents, myself included, can be irreverent at times where we probably shouldn't be. And I admit it. I've done it plenty of times. But in our country, when you're a kid, when you're raised here in America, it used to be that you were raised with some sense of how great our country was. You said the Pledge of Allegiance when you started your day in class. You had kind of a respect for the flag. Even if you weren't doing all of that and didn't get a bunch of advice from your parents on how to comport yourself to the country, you would take your ball cap off at a baseball game during the national anthem. And if you didn't, somebody else in the crowd would be like, hey, buddy, take your hat off. And then you're like, oh, yeah, you take your hat off, right? Right? What's happening to all that? The left has no respect or reverence for our past. In fact, they have contempt for it. I mean, how many times have they torn down statues in any city across the country, to include Washington, D.C., the nation's capital? Just tearing down statues recklessly? They're pulling down statues of Frederick Douglass, for goodness sake. They don't even know what they're pulling down. They have no idea who's even represented on some of these things. Getting rid of statues of Teddy Roosevelt in New York City. And that leads us to where we are now, which is United States senators and their leaders don't actually have a reverence for the job that they're supposed to be doing. By allowing John Fetterman to dress in his shorts and his maintenance worker shirt as he walks onto the floor of the United States Senate, not just walks onto the floor, presides over the Senate. Yesterday, he was the presiding senator for the whole United States Senate, sitting in center stage on the dais, leading the day's affairs as each senator takes a turn doing. And that's what he was up to. That's what he was up to. And the point of this is what exactly? It's meant to sort of diminish the whole entire enterprise, isn't it? It's not important to wear a tie. It used to be. It used to be. Up until like last week, it was important to wear a tie. I guess not anymore. Not with John Fetterman lurching around. You don't have to wear a tie. Just wear a crappy shirt, crappy shorts. He's probably wearing Crocs. I can't see his feet. Sorry, Corey. And he's sitting there on the dais, leading affairs at the Senate. And this is in line with kind of their attitudes towards everything. It's all narcissistic, and fundamentally, it's all Marxism. That's all at the bottom of this. is an animosity towards all hierarchies, including wholesome ones. Most importantly, merit-based hierarchies are anathema to the left. They hate merit-based hierarchies, which is why they're constantly trying to destroy them. Reverence for your elders and your past, and reverence for institutions. What are the chances that John Fetterman's going to end up at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier screaming his head off outside, acting like a clown? Who knows? But honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if it happened. We, as a country, we used to care about this stuff. Some of us still do. The suit thing has nothing to do with his ability to process something that he hears. In fact, he was wearing a suit up until this week. Now he's not. So it's not his disability that's led him to not wear suits and to insult the American people. It's just his disregard for the decorum of the Senate or our country. On Thursday, the senator spoke at a U.S. Senate Special Committee on Aging with other guests with disabilities. Fetterman became emotional after presenting a transcription app that allows him to fully participate in this meeting and communicate with members of his family. Here's Fetterman. Here's some audio for you. Hopefully this works. Here's John Fetterman talking about apparently getting emotional in a hearing.
Thank you for coming. And for me, it's been a very personal issue with me. And I'm going to show this, and then I'm going to describe this to others. This is my iPhone, and this is a transcription service that allows me to fully participate in this meeting and conversations with my children and interacting with my staff. I had a stroke about 18 months ago, and I have lost my ability to fully process language.
Right.
And I like to think I was an empathetic person.
By the way, have you noticed, I guess he's done some interviews in the last week or so, that his ability to communicate just based on what's in his head and getting it out of his mouth has definitely improved. Like, that clearly is a sign of positive recovery. But he's having trouble hearing and understanding things from other people. That's why he relies on this screen. And again, if you have that much trouble, it is okay for voters to ask themselves, are you the right person to be in the Senate? Even if, and especially if, you have an affliction that harms your ability to process information.
Truly. But until that happened, I've raised to a whole different kind of level as well. And it's profound to know, though, that I never really considered that without this kind of technology, I couldn't watch television. And I can't imagine if I didn't have this kind of a bridge to allow me to communicate with other people effectively. And, because I live in a political environment, I was ridiculed and made fun of because I wasn't able to process things.
Pennsylvania Democrats should have never let him continue. That should have been the end of his campaign. The whole thing was so crazy. It's an insult to the people of Pennsylvania. But now he's playing the victim in the midst of all of this. He's dressed. I'm telling you, he's sitting there. I love this. He's insulting the American people, and he's angry. He's saying, I'm being ridiculed and made fun of. He's dressed like a complete slob sitting in this Senate hearing. And that has nothing to do with, quote, disability at all. That's just him insulting us.
So what do you call it here at the White House when 10,000 people illegally cross the border in a single day?
So what do you call it, Peter, when GOP puts forth a wait, no, you can't.
Green?
I'm answering. Okay, we're gonna move
You're
on.
answering the question with the question? Okay.
No. We're moving on.
Green,
moving.
please.
In the back.
Now, you said you were stopping the flow at the border.
No. I tried to answer, Peter.
Okay.
I tried to answer the question. You stopped me. Let's go.
Yeah, no, she didn't actually. She tried to evade the question, and then when Peter Doocy circled back and said, hey, no, answer the question I asked you, she freaked, panicked, sprinted away. It's the cringe way, you see. By the way, the Washington Times has a headline this week, traumatized children taken from parents. Border Patrol says surge of migrants forces splits in overwhelmed facilities. Yes, to put a finer point on it, the Biden administration is separating children from their parents. Where's the rest of the media? The Washington Times doing great work. The great one, Mark Levin, up next.